So think about this for a second. What if you treated, a struggling post-industrial American city exactly like a Silicon Valley startup?
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Right, like you give it a seed round, an angel investor basically hands over this relatively modest check and just says, okay, show me what you can build.
Yeah, and, in the startup world, that initial injection of capital is, well, it's rarely enough to fund the company forever.
Definitely not.
But it acts as the catalyst, right? It de-risks the venture. It proves the concept is viable so you can, attract the really serious long-term investors and actually get the economic engine running.
Exactly. And we are applying that exact lens today to this, frankly, fascinating masterclass in urban rebirth.
It really is a masterclass.
Yeah. So we're taking a deep dive into an April 2026 report from the Fulton County Center for Regional Growth. And the subject here is the city of Gloversville, New York.
A classic post-industrial town.
Right. And back in December 2021, the state awarded Gloversville a $10 million grant. This was through their Downtown Revitalization Initiative, or the DRI. And then Governor Kathy Hochul gave the final green light for the specific projects in November 2022. But the timeline here is, it's super aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
Because by May of last year, 4 of these massive projects were already complete.
Which I have to say is just an exceptionally fast turnaround for municipal infrastructure.
It really is.
Because, post-industrial towns all across the country have faced these steep historical economic headwinds. And the traditional approach is usually, well, it's a desperate bid to lure one massive corporate factory back to town.
Right, the silver bullet approach.
Exactly. But Gloversville is trying something entirely different.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we're
Right.
talking about $10 million.
Yep.
To an individual, listening right now, that is life-changing money.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you are talking about, replacing underground pipes, fixing roofs, overhauling entire blocks of city infrastructure, just keep coming back to that startup analogy,
Right.
is a relatively small amount of seed money, like $10 million, actually enough to save an entire downtown district?
And that really is the central tension of this whole report.
Yeah.
Because if you take $10 million and you just spread it evenly across every pothole, every broken streetlight, every random municipal issue,
It just disappears.
the money totally vanishes.
Yeah.
The impact is completely diluted.
Mhm.
So to make that seed money work, a city has to be incredibly targeted.
I'd have to pick a lane.
Exactly. They have to pick a single, highly specific engine for economic synergy.
Mm.
And what makes this particular case study so compelling is the actual engine that Gloversville chose.
Right, because they chose the arts.
Yeah.
Which on the surface feels like a massive gamble.
It sounds super risky on paper.
Right. But former Mayor Vincent DeSantis is quoted in the report, and he says the goal is a 21st century post-industrial community. And then Jim Meinhold, he's the president of the Memorial Hall Cultural and Arts Center. He lays it out so clearly. He explains that the city made a very purposeful decision to recreate Gloversville along the lines of arts and culture, specifically to act as a magnet to attract artists.
It's just a profound shift in thinking, because instead of trying to, recreate the manufacturing past like so many towns do, they're trying to engineer a creative ecosystem.
A completely different vibe.
Exactly.
Right.
But an ecosystem requires physical infrastructure.
Right.
Artists need affordable spaces to work, to perform, to live. So the city planners looked at the center of their downtown and realized the physical giants they needed were already standing right there.
Just totally dormant.
Completely dormant.
So we're talking about the historic theaters.
Yeah.
And let's look at the Shing Memorial Hall because, man, the lifespan of this building maps perfectly onto the economic lifespan of the whole region.
It really does. It's almost poetic.
It starts out as the Casson Opera House in 1881. And then fast forward to the 1920s and the Schneider brothers purchase it. They use it as the headquarters for their massive movie theater enterprise.
The Sheen Circuit.
Right. But as the 20th century progresses, the local leather manufacturing industry, which is basically the lifeblood of Gloversville, it goes into this deep decline.
Yeah.
And as the money leaves the town, the building suffers. By the 90s and early 2000s, this massive, gorgeous structure is just sitting there vacant.
And what's fascinating here is the chronological timeline of the rescue. Because the state didn't just swoop in with a $10 million grant to spark a sudden interest in this building.
No, the community was already on it.
Exactly. A dedicated group of local citizens actually banded together in the early 2000s to save the structure from the wrecking ball.
They literally stopped it from being demolished.
Yeah, and they eventually formed a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So the civic passion, the grassroots momentum, it was already there. They were fighting this losing battle against the raw economics of maintaining an 1881 opera house.
Which has to be incredibly expensive.
Oh, astronomical.
Yeah.
So the state seed money simply funded the people who were already doing the heavy lifting.
Right. So when the DRI grant finally arrived, that citizen-led nonprofit received roughly $346,000. And I love this part. They didn't blow it on like gold leaf paint or fancy velvet curtains.
Oh, you have to do the boring stuff first.
Exactly. They spent it on the unglamorous foundational mechanics of just making the building legally usable. We're talking HVAC systems, heating, putting in a kitchenette.
The bones of the building.
Yeah. And they renovated the third floor to house a music school, the Sheen Gallery, and an artist co-op.
Which is huge for drawing people in.
And Ron Zimmerman, the co-manager, notes that they want artists of all genres in there. And the crazy thing is, the economics are actually working.
Really?
Yeah. The first and second floors are already fully rented out, and they have plans to build a museum on the east side, all in alignment with bringing more people downtown.
So they basically turned a vacant liability into this localized economic hub. But, a single hub doesn't make an ecosystem.
No, you need more than one.
You need a network.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a property just down the street, the Glove Theater.
Oh, the Glove. Built in 1914, this was the flagship building for the Shine Circuit.
Right.
And the city allocated $2 million in DRI funds to the Glove, plus another $2 million from Restore NY.
That's a massive injection.
Right. And they are using that money for, again, crucial structural upgrades, rigging, lighting, acoustics, and restoring the historic balcony. And then last year, they brought in Thaler Riley Wilson Architecture to map out a truly massive $18 million full restoration.
$18 million. That's incredible. But think about the underlying strategy here. A post-industrial town is leveraging its 19th and early 20th century entertainment palaces to fuel a modern economic revival.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They aren't, bulldozing their history to build some generic glass and steel future.
Right. They aren't erasing the past.
They are literally retrofitting their past to power a 21st century economy.
It is brilliant urban design, truly. However, any urban planner is going to warn you about the trap of the what they call the isolated anchor.
The isolated anchor.
Yeah. A beautifully restored historic theater is ultimately just a building.
Okay.
So if visitors drive in from out of town, watch a 2-hour play, and then immediately get back in their cars and leave because the surrounding streets are dark and empty,
Oh, I see.
the city itself captures almost none of the economic benefit.
The theater makes ticket money, but the local restaurants and shops get nothing.
Exactly. You end up with this glowing beacon surrounded by a ghost town.
So to capture those tourist dollars, the city has to engineer what we call the halo effect.
Yes.
You have to build out a supporting ecosystem of housing, food, and, entertainment to capture that foot traffic for an entire evening.
Or even an entire weekend.
Right. So let's trace how Gloversville executed that halo effect, because the immediate problem with an $18 million theater restoration is that it takes years.
Oh, yeah. You're surrounded by scaffolding for a long time.
Exactly. So how does the arts programming survive while the main building is totally under construction?
In a backup plan.
And the answer was sitting right across the street. The Cass and Carriage House.
Oh, I read about this.
Yeah, this property had been vacant for 2 decades.
Wow.
20 years. And they directed $1.6 million in DRI funding, plus $1.5 million from Restore NY to completely overhaul it.
So it basically functions as a crucial bridge space.
Exactly.
While the Glove undergoes renovations, the Carriage House temporarily hosts all their performances. So the momentum of the arts programming doesn't just stall out and die.
Right, and the long-term plan for the Carriage House is pure economic retention. Because once the main theater is finished across the street, the Carriage House transforms into a mixed-use commercial and residential space. The first floor will be a sports bar and restaurant with a game room on the lower level.
Designed specifically to catch the theatergoers.
Exactly, to capture that crowd pouring out of a show at 10:00 p.m. And then you look at the former City Hall. They allocated $250,000 for renovations to house a new restaurant with sidewalk patio dining and a bakery and ice cream shop.
Oh, that's great.
And construction on that just kicked off at the end of 2025.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, notice how the timeline and the geography are interlocking here.
Right.
A visitor arrives in Gloversville on a Saturday. They grab coffee at the City Hall Bakery. They have dinner on the patio.
Right.
They walk across the street to see a show at the Glove. Afterward, they walk a few yards to grab a drink and play pool at the Carriage House Sports Bar.
It's all connected.
Exactly. Every step of that evening keeps a dollar circulating within the local Gloversville economy instead of leaving town.
It's a completely closed loop, but that solves the visitor equation. What about the supply side?
The artists themselves.
Right. A city built on arts needs artists. So where do they actually live?
Housing, always the biggest hurdle.
And this leads us to the Glove City Lofts, which honestly represents the most staggering financial figure in this entire report. Developer Ken Kearney invested $22 million into turning a vacant Church Street commercial structure into a 75-unit, affordable, loft-style apartment building.
Wow.
And it's custom-tailored to attract working artists. It even includes a 2,000-square-foot art gallery operated by the Glove Cities Arts Alliance.
That is exactly what we mean by a closed-loop economic design.
Yeah.
You need the affordable lofts to populate the artist workspaces at Sheen Hall. You need those artists producing work to fill the theaters.
Yeah.
And you need the bakeries and restaurants to feed the tourists coming to watch those artists perform.
Remove one element and the whole system collapses.
Exactly.
But wait, I want to pause on the financing of those lofts because the math here is wild.
Let's hear it.
Out of that massive $22 million price tag, the state DRI grant only accounted for $1.2 million. So we have this massive housing project relying on a relatively small $1.2 million slice of DRI money. Does this mean the state grant isn't really a full piggy bank, but more of a magnet for private developers?
Yes. You've just perfectly described how capital stacks work in real estate development.
Okay.
When a developer like Ken Kearney looks at a post-industrial city, he sees massive financial risk.
Sure.
But by committing that first $1.2 million, the state acts as the first money in. It absorbs that initial risk. It signals to private banks and lenders that the government is an active partner with real skin in the game.
Right. They aren't just cheering from the sidelines.
Exactly. And the Fulton County Center for Regional Growth even helped Kearney secure additional funding to make the math work. So that $1.2 million didn't buy a building, it bought the confidence needed to unlock the other $20 million.
That is super interesting. So the grand anchors, the theaters, and the massive lofts are secured. But, a city is more than its biggest buildings. You can have beautiful apartments and great theaters, but if the public spaces between them are blighted, nobody is going to walk around.
Urban planners literally call that the spaces in between.
Really?
Yeah, the physical public squares and the grassroots micro-businesses. These are the elements that give a city its unique personality.
And Gloversville leaned hard into reclaiming those spaces, like St. Thomas Square.
Oh, the parking lot.
Yeah. For years, this was just an underutilized parking lot, but using $1.1 million in DRI funds, plus $250,000 from the local St. Thomas Foundation, and another $250,000 from National Grid.
The regional utility company.
Right. They completely transformed it. They ripped up the asphalt and built this gorgeous pedestrian area with a fire pit and a four-season pavilion.
And think about the psychological shift that creates for someone living there. A parking lot is fundamentally transient. It is a place you leave your car where you go somewhere more important.
Like, you don't hang out in a parking lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by replacing it with a pavilion and a fire pit, you create a destination.
Yeah.
You are signaling to the community, this is a safe place to gather.
And they applied that exact same logic to a project they just called a piazza.
Okay.
There was this decayed structure called the Lidauer building that finally had to be demolished.
Right.
And instead of leaving a gaping dirt scar in the middle of downtown, they used $435,000 in DRI funds to construct an urban park right on the footprint.
Wow.
Now it's a gathering place for local concerts and weekly outdoor movie nights.
That's incredible.
They also funded Phase 2 of Trail Station Park. They used DRI money to build bathrooms and a kitchenette. And that builds on an earlier $365,000 state grant that installed a bridge and a splash pad.
And, these aren't just aesthetic upgrades.
No.
No, visual blight like a crumbling building or an empty dirt lot. it subconsciously reinforces a narrative of community decline.
That makes
Every
sense.
time a citizen walks past it, they literally feel like their town is dying.
Wow. Yeah.
But when they walk past kids playing at a splash pad or neighbors watching a movie in the piazza, it rewires the community psychology. It reinforces safety and vitality.
And to fuel that vitality at the grassroots level, the city carved out $540,000 from the total DRI grant for something called GRIP.
The Gloversville Revitalization and Improvement Program.
Right. These are micro grants capped at $100,000 each, designed solely for small local businesses. And the report highlights one of the first completed projects. They funded exterior masonry work for a business called the Shoe Leather Express.
Right, which is a square and round dance facility.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this particular detail.
Go for it.
We are talking about engineering a cutting-edge 21st century economic engine.
Yes.
And we're funding a square dance facility right next to the new modern St. Thomas Square.
I know, I know.
I mean, I love the quirkiness, but does the square dance hall actually drive economic momentum, or is this just, a fun local novelty?
It's a completely fair question. From a distance, it absolutely sounds like a novelty. But remember the mechanics of foot traffic we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The hardest thing to rebuild after severe municipal disinvestment is local morale.
Right.
A place like the Shoe Leather Express provides something that a sleek, modern coffee shop often doesn't.
Which is?
Regular, recurring, deeply community-driven foot traffic.
Oh.
The people showing up to Square Dance every Tuesday night are the exact same people who will buy a pastry at the City Hall Bakery or grab a drink at the Carriage House afterward, shifting the environment from empty storefronts to vibrant, quirky community hubs. That is essential for shifting the city's psychological morale.
Oh, wow. So you need the glossy $18 million theaters to bring in the weekend tourists, but you actually need the square dancers to keep the lights on during a random Tuesday in February.
Exactly. It provides baseline economic stability.
That makes so much sense.
But, we also have to ground all of this enthusiasm in the harsh reality of urban development timelines.
Right.
Because you have all these spinning plates, some finished in 2025, some are just starting construction now. How long does a true urban turnaround actually take?
Well, the grant writer, Nick Zabowski, emphasizes that it's one piece at a time. The goal is that this transformational change will trigger private investment, but it's not instant. And Jennifer Donovan, she's the downtown development specialist at FCCRG, she explicitly cautions that true revitalization takes time. These projects are incredibly complex.
They really are.
But she also notes that being halfway through the DRI plan in just 3 years, since that November 2022 announcement, is truly a significant accomplishment.
And this raises an important question, I think, about our modern societal expectation for instant gratification.
Right, we want everything tomorrow.
Exactly. If an online order is delayed, we complain.
Yeah.
But deep, systemic economic change, that operates on a generational timeline. It took decades for those historic buildings to empty out, and it's going to take more than 3 years to refill them.
So what does this all mean? To me, it brings up this sort of garden versus manufacturing analogy. Oh, how so?
Well, in a world of overnight tech startups, Jennifer Donovan is basically asking for patience. You can't just 3D print a vibrant community.
Right.
You have to plant the seeds like the state did with this grant, and then you just have to wait for it to grow.
That is the perfect way to frame it. You have to let the roots take hold.
Exactly. So bringing this all back to you, the listener, the core lesson to take away from Gloversville's masterclass is that whether you are trying to revitalize a post-industrial city, or reboot a struggling small business, or even manage a massive personal project, success requires a multi-pronged approach. You need large anchor projects like the Glove Theater. You need supporting infrastructure like the Carriage House. And most importantly, you need the patience to let the momentum build over years, not days.
I completely agree. And I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder off mic.
Okay.
Think about the abandoned or past its prime buildings in your own town, the ones you drive by every single day.
We all have them. If an abandoned 1881 opera house could become the beating heart of a 21st century economy, what hidden economic engines are sitting empty in your neighborhood right now, just waiting for someone with the right vision?